Hey everyone, it's Ben Hardy here, and in today's video, I'm going to be talking about the new Tacoma. I've had a chance to live with a couple of these for a week at a time. I also own the new Land Cruiser, which is built on the same platform as this Tacoma. And so I've learned a lot about the new platform, and there's a lot that I was wrong about, and we're going to be talking about a lot of that in today's video. Before we get in this video, huge shout out and thank you to the Orem Toyota for giving me some time with this Tacoma. Link to their website in the description down below. Let's get into it. So the first thing is the powertrain. Powering the new Tacoma is a turbo 2.4 liter 4-cylinder that goes through an 8-speed automatic transmission. You can also get this with a hybrid. The non-hybrid produces 278 horsepower and then 317 pound-feet of torque. The hybrid produces 326 horsepower and then 465 pound-feet of torque. Both of them get pretty good fuel economy, not the best for a smaller sized truck. I mean, you're talking about like high teens with this one on average, and then, you know, maybe low 20s with the hybrid. So my Land Cruiser doesn't have a massive amount of mileage on it, but it's got over 5,000 miles. Haven't had a single hiccup from the powertrain, and I've had two of these Tacomas to test for a week. One non-hybrid, one hybrid, and both of them, again, no hiccups whatsoever, and they both had pretty high mileage on them. Journalist miles as well given, so that means they're pretty beat up. And so the point that I'm trying to make is I think that, yeah, there's some initial quality issues with this powertrain, but I think it's a lot better than we've all given it credit for. Again, time will definitely tell in terms of long-term reliability, but it's impressive the power figures that it provides, and it might just be reliable in the long term. Now, before we move forward with this review, I do want to mention if you want to see more videos just like this, then I recommend you subscribe because I post content every single day. Now, the next thing that I've been critical with on the new Tacoma, and just new Toyotas in general, is how cheap that they feel. I mean, you look at some of the material use, like this super plasticky and kind of like thin feeling, and I mean the door panels, especially, you guys might not be able to hear very well because the interstate right next to us. But yeah, super thin metal, and you know, kind of my initial comments on that was, oh, this stuff is probably not going to be very durable. It's not going to last a long time because, yeah, just kind of cheap feeling. What I've discovered though, as I've reviewed some of these used Tacomas and what I've seen with my Land Cruiser as well, is although this stuff is kind of like more plasticky, thinner, weaker, I mean, even like this, it doesn't really change over time. Like, it actually still holds up really well. So yes, it feels a little bit more plasticky. Yes, it feels a little bit more flimsy, but it doesn't get more flimsy over time. So again, I think I was a little bit too harsh when it comes to judgment with the new Tacoma and all these plasticky elements. It looks like what they've basically done is they've saved weight and potentially in areas that they didn't really need to save weight in, but regardless, they've saved weight, and in doing so makes the vehicle a little bit more lighter, maybe a little bit more efficient, but it does feel cheaper. But then if it's just as durable, does it really matter? You can let me know on that. Now, the next thing with the Tacoma and the Tundra is ditching the leaf spring. So we've got a new multi-link setup with the Tacoma and with the Tundra. And the reason why I was slightly critical of it is just the ride height with these trucks. Like, the trucks kind of sit low, especially when you see like a, you know, this generation of Tacoma versus the previous gen, or definitely with the Tundra is a lot more apparent. When you park a previous gen Tundra next to a new one, the new ones definitely sit a lot lower. But what I've discovered with this suspension is it flexes really good off-road. Again, I've tested this with two Tacomas and then also with my Land Cruiser. And this particular truck doesn't have it, but you can get a stabilizer bar disconnect. I've got that in my Land Cruiser, and it actually makes a huge difference off-road with the articulation. This one just has the rear locking differential. It's on the TRD off-road. But anyways, with that stabilizer bar disconnect, with this new platform, it actually articulates amazingly well, and you get a ton of grip off-road. And so something that I was slightly critical of, you know, switching out the suspension, making the truck kind of ride a little bit lower, which again is good for fuel economy, good for on-road driving, I thought was bad for off-roading, but they've compensated massively with that stabilizer bar disconnect. So if you actually are into off-roading, I recommend optioning that out. Whether you get a Tacoma, a 4Runner, Land Cruiser, it's, well, you have to get at least a Land Cruiser spec because it's not on the 1958. So get a Land Cruiser spec and above, and it does make a really big difference. And then the last thing before we take it out and finish things up with this review is the pricing. So you guys can see this TRD off-road with cloth seats, right? So it has cloth seats. Stickers for $54,000. Pretty expensive truck, but if you actually look at the options, you don't have to make this as expensive as a lot of these trucks are that are on dealer lots. So black badges, 160 bucks. The bed liners, $575. $130 for door edge guard. bed scene lighting. I mean, you look at all these options, like they just add up so quickly, because you can see the base price there, $43,400. Now, if you look at this Tier D off-road upgrade package, again, that's another thing that you don't have to get. And so if you just get a Tier D off-road, and you start with that base price, and then you get the stabilizer bar disconnect, and you have a pretty basic truck, you're like, and then you can even add the bed liner, right? Because that's definitely a nice thing to have, so that your stuff isn't sliding all over the place, because it does have a composite bed, but the composite bed's pretty slippery, so this is always a nice option to have. But anyways, you add those, and you won't be $54,000. You'll be closer to like $46,000 roughly, which for the equipment you're getting with this truck, I'm not saying it's the deal of the century, but it's actually a really nice truck when it comes to like off-road performance, and it has everything you need for on-road as well, in my personal opinion. I mean, I will say, although it's expensive, the heated seats and heated steering wheel are definitely part of an expensive package. Definitely nice to have. So I figured we'd cap things off with driving, because a lot of things that I have to talk about are in regards to the driving. So I guess we'll start with the off-road topic again. The new multi-train select and crawl control, I've now had a little bit more time to kind of test both those systems in depth, and they're so much better than the previous system. So first off, the noise, right? You've probably seen the other reviews. They're a lot less noisy, which that's something that I personally don't care about. The biggest thing is the performance. The new system is a lot smoother, and so excuse me, what I find myself doing in my new Land Cruiser is basically, when I'm off-road, just throwing it in auto. Sometimes I've done rock crawl a couple times, but basically just auto. And then I don't even have the rear diff locked, and sometimes I don't even have the center diff locked. I just have it basically in four-wheel drive high or four-wheel drive low, and it's unstoppable. It feels unstoppable. And so the modern system that's also in this Tacoma that I've tested in the, most recently in the Trail Hunter, it's really impressive. It's really impressive, the stuff that this truck can go through stock. And that's the thing to note is, again, the previous gen Tacoma could go through some pretty crazy stuff stock, but if you really wanted to push it, you kind of had to modify it. Whereas the new one, I mean, you basically just put more aggressive tires on the truck, and obviously make sure you've got the skid plates underneath for when you hit stuff. And seriously, you can go up a lot, like more than what most people will end up doing. And then with the daily driving, right, this is better. And that's the thing that I wasn't ever critical about with the new Tacoma compared to the old one, because the new one just has more comfortable suspension. It's got more power. It doesn't gear hunt, right? The 3.5 with the 6-speed gear hunts like crazy. But that is something else to note is, excuse me, it's cold outside, so my throat's super dry. Is that this truck is more capable off-road, but you're not conceding on-road driving. Like, you're getting a truck that is more comfortable on-road and just better to daily drive. The biggest hang-up, right, I think for a lot of people is just, is this going to be reliable? And that's something where, it's just time will tell. Time will tell on that front. And then the last thing that I will say that, like, I'm still critical about with this new platform, engine platform in general. So you guys can see it's 32 degrees outside, and I've noticed with my Land Cruiser, when it's cold, it just gets horrible fuel economy. Like most of my other cars in the past, when it gets colder, I lose like maybe a mile per gallon. In my Land Cruiser, I've lost like 3 or 4 miles per gallon. So it seems like this engine really doesn't like the cold, which is weird because it's turbocharged. I mean, again, turbos don't like super cold temperatures, but I mean, like 30 degrees isn't that bad. Like I'm literally just wearing this little thin shirt, so like it's not that cold. But yeah, that's kind of my thoughts. I think the new Tacoma, I mean, my perspective is, I think that Toyota didn't explain things very well with this new Tacoma overall. Like, they kind of just released it, and I feel like they emphasized a lot on like this like fancy luxury tech that the new Tacoma has, which isn't bad, right? It's nice stuff, but they didn't really talk too much about like how much more capable this is when it comes to on-road and off-road driving compared to the previous gen. Like, again, the on-road stuff, a lot of us discovered right off the bat because most of the tests are on-road. The off-road stuff, it takes a little bit longer to tease out because you got to take the vehicles out a few times in different circumstances to really be able to see how this system performs compared to the previous. And once you do that, you realize the new truck is a lot better than the old one off-road with stock to stock. Like, it is a pretty substantial difference. And I just don't feel like Toyota did that very well with explaining that. And I also think the packaging has just, again, most people just look at what's in front of them. And so when you see these dealer ordered trucks that are mid-50s for a cloth interior Tier D off-road, you're like, what the heck? But then if you get, again, if you don't option this out like crazy, if you just do a Tier D off-road with a few options, you're, again, TFL ordered one of those, for example. You're not too bad with the price. Again, you're mid-40s, which is a little bit more expensive than the previous gen, but it's not like that much more than what you would have paid for a previous gen. Now, something to note, I still will say, is previous gen Tier D Pro was like 52, whereas this is, right, this is more than that. So I'm not claiming that the new Tacoma is cheap by any means. It still is a price increase. But you can get, again, depending on what you're looking for, with this new Tacoma, you can get a truck that is very capable off-road for not an insane amount of money. Again, mid-40s. The spec that and I don't even know if you can do this. I should have gone on Toyota's configurator before I made this video, but the spec that I think would be the best possible spec on the new Tacoma would be as such. So it would be Tier D off-road with the hybrid, stabilizer bar disconnect, that's it. And then what I would do is I would just add heated seats aftermarket, because that's like 500 bucks. You wouldn't have to get like a big, that's the thing, is you have to get big packages if you want certain features. I would just add heated seats aftermarket, and then boom, that would be like the perfect truck in my opinion. And I mean, it would still probably be close to like 50 grand because the hybrid's a decent upcharge. But I do think the hybrid, especially off-road, it makes a huge difference. But this engine's good enough. So if you wanted to be in the mid-40s, then you stick with this engine. But I can't remember if the hybrid, if they force you to get like a premium package or something, because I've only well, no, they don't force you to get premium, but I've only seen the hybrids with like a lot of other packages, and so they're always like mid-50s. And I think that's the other, something that Toyota should consider with this Tacoma. And this is what I'll close with. I think that Toyota should consider selling, because, you know, if you don't know how Toyota works, is they basically just give dealers allocation. I think they should consider giving dealers more allocation that is lower spec with Tier D off-road. If dealers having a bunch of $50,000 to $55,000 Tier D off-roads, it's not unsellable, but it makes things a little bit more difficult. I think if they had a bunch of, and they had a few of these, right? A few of these loaded up Tier D off-roads, like one or two, and then most of their Tier D off-roads were like 46 grand. I do think that they would sell a lot more of these new Tacomas. That's just my personal take, but let me know your thoughts.